I think you guys are obsessed with a cult leader who is taking the entire Republican Party off of a cliff.
Everything he say he do. Trump is gangster. Remember.
Can you give me one thing you don't like about Trump?
I love everything about Trump.
I know, because it's a cult. Thank you.
It's not a cult.
Donald Trump had been stoking the flames a year before the election, saying that the election was going to be rigged. And he invited people on the day of the certification, telling them that their election had been stolen, their country was being taken from them, they needed to fight like hell, that they were going to lose everything.
Right? 2:38 p.m., 27 minutes after the Capitol protesters had entered, he said, "Stay peaceful." At 3:13, he said, "Law and order." At 4:17, he posted a video saying, "Go home now." 27 minutes after the Capitol protesters had entered the Capitol.
After Ashley Babbitt had already been shot and killed. They weren't being peaceful. Why are we saying stay peaceful? Did the first people into the Capitol break in?
Is January 6th the only reason?
Are you unwilling to answer? You can say yes, you don't want to answer it, and then move on because you know the implications are terrible for you. Was there a delay in the certification? It was because the National Guard showed up and they kicked the people out after Donald Trump was forced to tell them they were going home. The first person that got into the Capitol who wasn't allowed in, how did he get in?
They walked into the Capitol.
No, they broke in with a riot shield that he's stolen from an officer.
Okay, and that makes President Trump unfit for office.
You acknowledge that happened. Acknowledge that
there was violence on January 6th. I acknowledge that.
And when there's a broken window, they don't see anything wrong with walking into a building if the window's already broken.
I thought conservatives were the party of law and order. If you were outside somebody's house and you saw somebody breaking in, you could walk in afterwards?
I do believe that there were people on that day who took things way too far, and I think most Republicans understand that. I do believe that there's a lot of people who are misled.
I do agree with you on your fundamental. There were a lot of people that were misled. I do agree with that. And I think that Donald Trump was behind that misleading the entire time. He told people to go to J6 because it would be a historic something, a historic event. When they all got there and they showed up at his speech at the Ellipse for an hour, he riles them up, telling them they're going to lose their country, that they're trying to steal it from you, that you need to fight like hell. Giuliani was just on there before saying trial by combat. He said all these things. And then all these people, he said, we're going to march down Pennsylvania. They all marched to the Capitol.
Is there anything wrong with protesting outside
I'm
the
just
Capitol?
asking, like, was the fact that there was a break into the Capitol and for the first time in U.S. history, the vote certification was delayed, was that just a coincidence?
Because people broke into the Capitol, that can't be blamed on President Trump. He is
so it was a coincidence.
If our border was filled with neo-Nazis with tiki torches, what would happen?
You'd probably sell a whole lot more lighter fluid. I don't know. What do you mean?
JFK against Nixon ran an alternate slate of electors in case it was overturned in Hawaii. It was eventually overturned in Hawaii, and so then those electors were certified, and JFK won the state.
So I'm glad you bring this up real quick. In 1960, two slates of electors were authorized by the state legislature. Both were granted the certificate of ascertainment from the governor because they knew that it was a very close election and they'd authorized a recount, and because that recount was going to go past some mid-December date, it's December 14th for the 2020 election, but some mid-December date for when they had to certify their vote. So they said, okay, well, we'll send in both certificates, and then on the day of the counting, on January certification in Congress, then they can choose which one was authorized by the state legislature based on the results of the recount. Donald Trump's certificates were not authorized by any state legislature. Quick, do you acknowledge real quick that none of the 7 slates that were submitted by Donald Trump, none of those were authorized by any state legislature?
Okay, what's wrong with that?
It's illegal. I think that Republicans don't know what is happening right now with the problems with the immigration system. A lot of people think that the issue is with illegal immigration. It's not. The problem is that our asylum process is completely and totally broken right now. And the problem is the only way to rectify that is to change the laws governing, or at least some of the regulations governing the asylum process. And when there was a bill on the table to do so, Donald Trump blocked it to keep the border open for an election issue. But as it stands right now, you could have the biggest, strongest wall in the world with the best guns and all the people manning it. It would make zero difference on illegal immigration. They would still come up and claim asylum, and there's nothing you'd be able to do about it.
So do you think there's problems with illegal and illegal? That's what I'm hearing correctly?
Well, it's different classifications of immigrants, but like asylum seekers aren't technically illegal immigrants, even though Republicans call them that. When they're doing the asylum seeking process and millions of people are here waiting to hear their case, technically that's all legal, which is an issue. We need to figure out a way to make that better.
Right. Within the bill, they're going to cap what is the average weekly immigrations at 5,000. That's still way too many people.
Do you know what it's capped at right now?
What is it capped at?
Nothing. That's why it was a good idea. What they allowed it to do is it allowed it to say if there were too many people coming in, they could put a 2-week moratorium and completely shut down people that were coming to the country to seek asylum. If Democrats wanted to allocate more money to the judges to process the claims faster, to allocate more money to border security to make sure people weren't coming in illegally, and then to be able to put a moratorium if too many people were coming in, wouldn't all of these things help?
I actually think you care. I've been following you for a while. I actually think you deeply care about this issue and how it's affecting the American people. I do believe that sincerely. What is for the tens of millions of folks who are going to watch this video, just what does asylum as a process represent to you? What does it mean to qualify legitimately for asylum?
Characteristics for it, but basically the place that you're fleeing, you're being persecuted for some characteristic or trait that we think that you obviously shouldn't be persecuted for, and you're facing like severe threats to your existence. And so you have to flee the country, and then You're basically coming to the United States saying, like, I'm basically stateless. I can't go back to my home. Like, me or my family's at risk. And can you, basically take me in and me become a citizen that way, basically?
That's exactly right. You're fleeing racial, religious, ethnic persecution. Absolutely. Poverty wouldn't count as asylum. What would that bill have done to deter the fraudulent asylum claims that are keeping out legitimate folks who are fleeing persecution?
Well, I think that right now, there's an amalgamation of laws that make it so that because the asylum system is so backed up, I know that if I go to the United States, even if my claim is total bullshit, I can run to a port, claim that I'm an asylum seeker, and I know that they can't process me right now, so I get a slip saying, okay, we'll come back to court in a year or two, and it's like, I'm in, and you're done. At that point, you just disappear, right? But if they could process you almost immediately, you show up and you're like, hey, I'm a asylum seeker. It's like, oh, cool, we'll come talk to the judge. You're like, okay, well, f me. Then the motivation to come in and try to get in fraudulently that way, I think, dramatically decreases. And one of the big things that the bill helped with was providing a lot more judges that would be allocated for these things and a lot more funding for it, et cetera.
So just clearly here, customs officers under the bipartisan border bill would be then given authority to process these claims. They don't have law degrees. They aren't judges. Judges typically kick these cases, but in this particular bill by Langford, it would actually be customs officers.
Customs officers would make the final decision on whether or not a person gets into the
And that's
country.
how you build up capacity, because you couldn't hire more immigration judges. There aren't enough people in the country to take those
I think you
judges.
can. I think the issue is that the judge number has been capped since, I think, the 80s or the 60s in terms of how many judges are allowed to hear these claims. So we haven't had more funding that was allocated
Why
to us,
not
actually.
bring back remain in Mexico? It absolutely works, Stephen.
Because I don't think it necessarily works, number one, because not that many people were kept out. And number two, even as a matter of policy, I don't know if the idea to the country to the south, he was like, hey, listen, if any people coming to asylum, we're going to go ahead and store them in your country while we wait and process it.
Yeah.
I don't know how even Mexico would feel about that. I don't know if the conditions would necessarily be safe for those people either. Because I thought that one of the claims that I heard so much from the Trumples was how unsafe all of these like border towns had become because of so many people building up there. So why would you want to stick a legitimate asylum seeker there and keep them there? Would you agree that if somebody was coming here to legitimately seek asylum and it was a legitimate case, that it would probably be good to take them in and house them immediately?
In an ideal world, absolutely. But we need to also separate those who are abusing the system. Again, 90% of those claims are fraudulent. But
So then shouldn't we increase the funding to process those claims as quickly as possible?
I think the deterrent is better in Mexico. But Stephen, let's agree to disagree, okay?
Okay.
I agree with you that the asylum process is the problem. The emergency powers could only be activated if 5,000 people crossed over the border daily over a 7-day period, right?
Yeah, but then after that happens, you can shut the border down for 2 weeks and process zero. That was the nice thing about it. We don't have an issue right now with illegal immigrants coming into this country. We have a problem right now.
Absolutely.
I know,
we do.
yeah, stay f***ing mad because you guys can't f***ing read. That's fine. The problem.
So under the Trump administration, inflation was consistently at 2%. Under Biden-Harris, it's 5.5.
What do you think the biggest contributor to the Biden-Harris inflation has been?
Starting COVID.
Yeah. Okay. So COVID happened. So if we look at Donald Trump's administration and we look at what he did, he ran massive budget deficits. He did nothing to cut spending. He did giant tax cuts, right? And he pressured the Fed to keep interest rates.
Well,
low.
Harris adds like $1 trillion per year to the.
Yeah, but at least they can argue for why they would have deficits, right? Because they're trying to save us from a massive recession, which more or less they did. Everything that Donald Trump talks about when he wants to come back in his next term seems like things that would just be inflationary. He wants to tariff everything.
Well, he wants to drill more, which will lower the price of everything.
We already are a world producer in energy. I don't know how much drilling more is going to help. I don't even know how we'll have the people to drill because he wants to increase tariffs.
Well, just stuff made out of America.
What?
Which will benefit the American.
Yeah, but if it's made out of America, then what? Then who's going to be drilling when we're all busy like making clothes and making shoes and making the most basic fundamental products?
Well, not all of us, obviously. Yeah.
Why didn't we see the inflation in the first term under Trump under these tariffs that you're so concerned about?
Because I think that raising prices and everything can kind of be masked through the allocation of money to other assets, especially when the economy is growing. So the world economy is growing, right? Inflation has to do with dollars chasing supplies of goods, basically. And if the supplies continue to grow at a really high rate, you can probably afford more deficit spending. But the issue is that I don't think that Donald Trump was intelligently saying like, well, I can probably afford a deficit spend here because of the economy. I think he just likes to spend. I don't think that Trump would have the ability to rein it in.
Objective speaking, when you look at tariffs, what does it try to solve for?
Tariffs can be levied for a variety of different reasons. The 2 most common reasons that are given is that 1, it can be foolishly employed to try to protect an industry. So you would tariff other people to make your own industries more competitive. These require across-the-board tariffs, so not specific ones. And then a second reason could be for issues relating to, say, like national security. So for instance, I want to tariff these people's abilities to manufacture microchips or steel, not because I think we'll be economically better off, but because if we get into war with them, I don't want to be relying on them for processing.
I think the latter case makes a lot of sense, by the way. If you get to war with China, now listen.
Although I would be honest about the latter one and say we don't do it for economic reasons, we do it for security reasons.
That's fine. Yeah. Does China have tariffs on us? Yes. Does Europe have tariffs on us? Yes. It's not free trade when they're rigging it against us. If they're putting tariffs on us, hurting our workers, hollowing out places from Middletown, Ohio to parts of Appalachia, why can't we put in place a deterrent that says, look, if you're going to rig the system against American workers, we are going to level the playing field?
Sure, I'm fine with that. Yeah. Whatever you're saying, that was nothing to do with the Trump administration. What you're saying is you're talking about getting into a tariff war to try to bring tariffs down or to force somebody to engage in negotiations to bring tariff down in order to re-enter trade agreements, kind of like when Donald Trump renegotiated NAFTA into the U.S. Mexico-Canada trade agreement, right?
And
but
you know
however,
but
you can't just say
Stephen,
Donald Trump doesn't say
the threat of tariffs
that's great,
to bring them to
but
the
Donald
negotiating
Trump is
table.
not talking about using tariffs to get more people to negotiate. He wants to create an autarky. That's his goal. Do you acknowledge that Donald Trump wants us to manufacture everything at home? That's all of his rhetoric. Do you
No.
acknowledge? He doesn't say that. Okay.
No, half of working age men who are not in the labor force are taking opioid painkillers every day. The broken industrial
And you think
policies
that
of this country,
and you think having
from
them
George
manufacture
Bush
shoes that
to
aren't
Bill
being made in
Clinton-
China is going to magically
No,
get rid of that
no,
problem?
no.
Do you think that we can manufacture every single good we
No,
consume
I
at
don't
home?
think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
What is the goal of 1,000 or 500 or whatever 100%?
Where are
tariffs?
Teslas made? The final assembly, a large.
Do you
a
understand
large
that yesterday
portion.
when Donald Trump was doing his interview with Bloomberg, he made fun of that? Donald Trump shit on companies like Tesla when he said, we do the final assembly here, we could have children do that. It's just throwing together Legos. Donald Trump doesn't like final assembly. Donald Trump wants not just the Tesla final assembly here, but all the batteries, all of the steel, every single component of that made in America. Again, your plan sounds great. That sounds like an ordinary, like decent economic plan. Donald Trump's plan is autarky. It's ridiculous.
I'm glad you like my plan. Thanks.
Okay, if you run for president, I'll support it.
I appreciate it.
As everybody's already discussed, tariffs are actually beneficial to American manufacturing.
Why do you think every single economist hates tariffs?
Why do you hate American manufacturing?
Because I hate America. I don't know. What kind of a question?
No, because manufacturing jobs actually bring people out of poverty. So what is your problem with manufacturing in America?
My problem is in America, because we're such an educated country and because we're such an advanced country, we can do more with our manufacturing than making the most bare bones things that other countries might be better suited towards creating.
You don't think these low-skilled jobs are important. That's very sad. A company called BYD in my backyard that brings in Chinese immigrants and pays them Chinese wages in America. And my representative, Mike Garcia, got that organization defunded.
Maybe your company shouldn't exist in America. Maybe you should go to China and make your company. Go to China and make the company. That would be better. You should do that. Yes, I'm arguing that American workers can earn more money than
you are very sad.
I'm saying
you don't love America.
Elon Musk.
You are proving that you don't love America because you don't want Americans to benefit. You don't want American manufacturing to lift people out of poverty. That is sad.
The total revenue during Biden and Trump was close to the same, and he was spending almost double the amount each year.
Why did Donald Trump engage in massive deficit spending?
I don't know the answer to that. Can you answer it?
Yeah, because he likes to spend, because it makes the economy look better.
Okay, so the same thing that Biden and Harris does.
Yeah, but they have a reason
at an
because
increasing
they're
correct?
coming in under
at an increasing
rate to stave off recession.
Okay,
Yes,
then what
there's
about the
a
Federal
difference.
Reserve printing $16 trillion in 2 years? But you don't want to take in deficit spending. You don't want to take in the Federal Reserve printing money. You also don't
If
want to
you
take
want to talk about the Federal Reserve rates were not only low under Trump, he pressured them to be low. He literally bragged about it in his interview, and he said that when he comes back in, one of his goals is to keep the federal interest rates low. He talked about bringing Jerome Powell into his office and threatening him to keep the rates low. So if you don't like deficit spending, if you don't like the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, if you don't like free money, then it feels like Donald Trump is literally the worst case for you.
Well, wouldn't you say the deficit spending is causing inflation? So
It
doesn't
can,
that take
yes.
more money away from Americans by your logic?
I don't know if it takes more money away from America, but deficit spending can
So
lead to...
higher inflation doesn't take money away from Americans?
It can. It's more complicated than that, but yeah, it can. But I'm saying that deficit spending in and of itself is generally inflationary, but there are reasons why you might want a deficit spend. For instance, it's better to have some inflation than it is to have a recession or full depression, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that. Now, you bring up tariffs. Now, why did we extend them under Biden, and then why do we double the tariffs from Canada as well if tariffs are so bad? So when Biden does it, it's okay, but when Trump installs them, they're horrible.
So the issue is, if you're talking about specific tariffs as retaliation because somebody else might be tariffing something that they shouldn't, if they're engaging in that, then that type of thing, as was discussed earlier, I think is okay. I would say the two big points for fascism would be ultranationalism and authoritarianism.
Okay, what is authoritarianism?
I would say that authoritarianism is trying to centralize as much power in like a structural sense into one part of the government, and then in a broader sense, it usually means undermining a bunch of liberal values that you would find, like, say, in the first.
So then how is it that every part of the government which accrues more and more power to itself every single year aren't a bunch of fascists?
Because the government gaining power doesn't necessarily make it fascist. So I think ultra-nationalism is when you engage in a hardcore protectionist ideology that usually involves shutting yourself out from the rest of the world. That could be in forms of international affairs like military conflicts, and it could be in the forms of ultra-protectionist in terms of trade and shutting down things like immigration in order to protect your own native peoples. So, oftentimes there's a heavily racialized element, but it might not have to be.
Okay, well, Donald Trump, you're not saying has a heavy racialized element, are you?
I'm ambivalent. I don't really care that much. I think that he qualifies or satisfies the term without that. But
okay, so, if you have a president who doesn't want to get involved in foreign affairs as far as wars go, and has some type of policies which benefit the United States over all other nations, is he a fascist?
No.
What is he doing, which is accumulating all power to himself?
So he's trying to centralize power in the executive branch of the government, and specifically in the presidential part of the government, of the executive branch.
How?
How Donald Trump thinks that he should be able to unilaterally make decisions up and down all of the different departments and offices that exist in the executive branch.
Presidents use executive orders all the time.
That's not what an executive order is.
Presidents unilaterally make decisions all the time.
No, they don't?
Yes, they do.
No,
they
they
do.
don't.
They use executive orders all the time.
An executive order doesn't mean that you are taking power away from the departments and offices that have been created.
Right, so where's the fascism here?
Would you like me to give you specific
yes,
examples?
give me the specific example.
Sure. So when Donald Trump didn't like the answer that he was getting from his attorney general because he was trying to direct the Department of Justice to do investigations or to fabricate claims claims, that would be an example of trying to centralize power just to the president, because he's undermining his own department that's been created for him, that's supposed to have some level of independence, that's tasked with doing investigations.
President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States?
I believe so.
Do they have control of the entire military apparatus, essentially, as the Commander-in-Chief?
As the Commander-in-Chief, yes.
Yeah. Is that fascist?
No.
So they have basically almost unilateral control by your own metrics of the most mighty military on planet Earth. That's not accumulating enough power, centralized control to one person. It's the fact that he tried to slay some fucking electors. Really?
So the president being the commander-in-chief is specifically laid out in the Constitution. That's an authority granted to him. I don't know what's fascist about that.
Well, because you said it's ultra power. It's this idea of having central power. If you have the central power,
I didn't ever bring that up for him. But
if you have the central power of the most mighty military on planet Earth and the codes to the largest nuclear armament on planet Earth, you already have all of the central power, bro.
Really?
Yeah.
How do the nuclear codes help you direct your Department of Justice?
So your claim is,
how does that make him control the DOJ? How does the military help him control the DOJ?
Back up. That is the most powerful position I can think of for you to be in. What more accumulation of power would you want for a fascist dictator?
Gotcha. Okay, so that's powerful in that you controlled the military. That's it. That's just control of the military. For the FBI coming to your house to arrest you, for the DOJ filing charges against you.
You said the military to do it.
No, the president doesn't do that.
He
I don't
could.
know if I don't believe that he can. I don't believe you can. I don't think that you can deploy the military to arbitrarily arrest U.S. citizens.
You're not voting for Trump.
No.
I am. I think we can have a respectful policy disagreement without labeling one side or the other fascist or communist or Marxist. So let's have a policy disagreement here. You think Donald Trump is a fascist because of ultranationalist tendencies and authoritarianism, correct?
Yeah.
So let me just draft this vision and see if it makes sense. The authoritarianism is ruling by presidential decree, prosecuting political opponents, and abandoning our allies abroad. That sounds a lot like the Biden-Harris administration.
Well, no, wait. We'll go point by point. Okay, so, first of all, when we talk about abandoning allies abroad, are we referring to? So we haven't cut funding from Israel. Are we referring to when Donald Trump abandoned the Kurdish people to Turkish attacks in Syria? Are we talking about when the Trump administration cut out the Afghanistan government in the Doha Accords when they were talking with the Taliban? Or are we talking about when Biden tried to support Ukraine with the full force of not only the United States economy and our moral support, but also by getting Europe on board to help Ukraine? The idea that the Biden and Harris administration have abandoned our foreign partners is nonsense to me. And also, it's not just about making the government more powerful. I know that Andrew tried to run with that. It's about centralizing power within the government.
Right, and wiping off student loan debts at the expense of working class Americans. I understand that, but let's
hold on. Wiping out student loan government. The citation for that was was a bill that was passed from Congress. Biden tried to do that because of during it was like extraordinary times that you could do something, and he tried to stretch it to that. Well, he hasn't done anything illegal, right?
We're talking about.
There's no answer to that. Okay.
Let's talk about October 7th. October 7th would not have happened if President Trump was in office. Ukraine would not have been invaded by Russia if President Trump was in office. You can call him crazy, you can call him anything. He was an effective deterrent because he understood, Stephen, a little thing we like to call peace through strength. Here's the truth.
The truth is October 7th probably happened likely because of Trump and his policies.
Well, holy moly, why is that?
Why is that?
Yes, please.
The reason why is because Donald Trump engaged in more reckless behavior with Israel that only encouraged Israel's expansionism without doing anything to actually address the Palestinian problem. For instance, Donald Trump agreed to moving and recognizing the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem that instigated everybody in the region, including the Palestinians, which is why you saw the whole border riots, the Great March of Return that erupted over the year protesting that. And then Donald Trump, along with Kushner, tried to help Israelis negotiate multilateral peace agreements or more bilateral peace agreements through the Abraham Accords, again, while cutting out the Palestinians. All of this just continued to drive the Palestinian plight further and further because they saw more and more allies being isolated from them. They saw no recognition over in the United States. And then obviously, terrorist attacks is all you can do from that point, apparently. So
Trump moved an embassy, got Muslim majority countries for the first time ever to recognize the rightful existence of the Jewish state of Israel. And that justifies the heinous attack we saw on October 7th, where we killed over 1,000.
Who said anything justified
Well, you
anything?
said that Trump was responsible
I said that Donald
7th.
Trump and his foreign policy posturing is what moved us in that direction.
President Biden was in office for 3 years before October 7th happened. How possibly could that be Trump's fault?
What did Biden do to contribute to the conditions that made October 7th happen?
Very clear, very clear. Iran was only exporting 150,000 barrels of oil a day under Trump. Now they're exporting 1.6 million. They're making hundreds of billions of dollars a year more. That emboldens them to give their proxies weapons, money, and the vigor to attack the Jewish state. And that is unacceptable in the international community. Let me tell you something about President Trump.
You think the only reason that Hamas attacked Israel, you think the only reason they'll be able to do it is because of increased Iranian funding?
Who funds Hamas?
In part, it's Iran, but Hamas gets funding from all sorts of different adventures.
Who funds Iran?
They get money from Qatar, right?
Who funds? Okay. Who funds Hamas? Of course they do.
Right? Probably
Who gives
more money. I think.
No.
It might have been Qatar, I think, actually.
Well, they give them a Ritz-Carlton hotel room, but listen.
No, they were transferring a whole lot of money to the Gaza Strip. That was one of the big things, one of the big scandals that Netanyahu was involved in, was allowing that money to pass through to the Gaza Strip.
Stephen,
under
let's
his
just do some
supervision.
quick logical reasoning here. If Iran gets more money, that's good for Hamas, right? You agree on that? Come on.
Broadly speaking.
Broadly speaking, yeah, come on. Just concede one thing, Stephen. Come on.
Broadly speaking, probably, yeah. There's more at play here that I'm not even sure if you're aware of. So the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, has some amount of money that's guaranteed to it regardless of whether exporting or importing as a country. In general, I agree with you, sure, yeah.
And you know what? I am glad that President Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, because that man is responsible for death and destruction. The targets he made on the Jewish state were completely unacceptable.
Okay.
Stephen,
I don't even think the targets he made on American citizens in Iraq was unacceptable. Well, I have no love lost for Soleimani. I'm glad the dude's dead. I'm not going to sit here and defend it, but Donald Trump doesn't do anything good foreign policy-wise for Israel. He doesn't have a vision for the region. That's why he had to basically leave all of it to his son-in-law, Kushner.
So why was Crimea annexed under Obama? Why was Ukraine invaded under Biden? Why did nothing happen under Trump for 4 years? It was a complete stalemate, complete stability.
Crimea was still occupied, right?
Okay, but it was annexed under who?
Hold on. It was still occupied, right?
Of course, but let's be realistic.
There was a civil war that was raging in the Donbass the entire time, right?
Accelerate? Did it accelerate? Was there new land claims?
Yes, there was more, not new land claims, but the civil war in the Donbass was still going on. What did Donald Trump do about that?
The world is safer under President Trump. The world was safer under President Trump. The world knows that, Stephen, and the world's going to show that on November 5th.
Okay. We can argue, should they have the role to do that or not? I just don't know if that's necessarily fascistic, like Donald Trump trying to direct his DOJ to, go after certain people, or trying to direct his DOJ to,
Biden's done that with all the...
There's zero evidence for any of that, and probably, it's almost certainly not true if you look at how Merrick Garland has gone after, for instance, his son.
Okay, so I wanted to hone in on the part about nationalism. Can you explain that again in a little bit more detail?
Sure, so I would say more ultranationalism than just nationalism, but it's this idea that, basically screw the rest of the world, we're going to hardcore cut immigration, we're going to hardcore cut our trade, we're going to hardcore cut our association with anybody else, and we're just going to be like our own little, basically, island nation. I think it's a very bad direction to go in.
And who's taking us in that direction?
I think that's what Donald Trump wants to do.
Wants to do? He was in office for 4 years. Did he do that?
Well, Donald Trump began some tariff processes. He tried to do a full Muslim ban. He took steps towards that. He took steps towards that.
Is people who love America, who love living here, have been titled nationalists, and it's like a threat all of a sudden?
People that label themselves MAGA that say they love America have nothing to do with American values and nothing in common with the core values of this country. So they're the least American people. Sure, the desire to elect somebody who says the most obviously fascist things in the world, like the media is the enemy of the people, a guy who says he wants to terminate the Constitution, a guy who says he'd be a dictator on day one.
Who's terminating the Constitution?
Donald Trump said that he believes he could terminate the Constitution because of
voter fraud. It's so crazy because I've been hearing a lot lately from your side that the Constitution isn't necessary anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which lawmaker or presidential candidate said that?
Your side.
Which, is that the name, first and last? Your side?
Yeah.
Like Miss Side? Or is she a congressman? Or is she a senator? Or I don't know which leader has said that, so I can't speak to that. I don't know who you follow on Twitter, so I can't
as an American.
But anyway, you acknowledge that Donald Trump said that in times of great peril, you can suspend the Constitution, and that he would do that for voter fraud.
For voter fraud?
He said that, yes. On Truth Social, he said that. You agree that Donald Trump said that he would be a dictator on day one?
He did not say he would be a dictator on day one.
Okay.
Okay, cool. You mentioned about inflation and everything, but when I go to the grocery store and a bag of groceries is like $50 and I have 2 kids to feed, do you think that helps me as an American, or do you think that hurts me as an American?
I think an expansion of the child tax credit would help you a lot more than another tax cut for wealthy billionaires.
A couple $1,000s isn't going to change my life, especially when...
Another $6,000 a year wouldn't help you at all with groceries?
With 2 children?
Yeah?
This much, maybe, but if the price
of your children eating?
So why is nationalism at all even bad in the first place?
I don't know if nationalism is necessarily bad. I think that people kind of swap it out with patriotism sometimes. That's why there's the prefix ultranationalism. Ultranationalism is bad. It's because when you elevate your own country, just
what did he do for ultranationalism?
When he talks about putting tariffs across the board for every single other country on the planet.
How is bringing manufacturing over here, which is helped by tariffs, how is that
we manufacture things here. If we've got more people manufacturing baser goods, then we can't manufacture more sophisticated goods. There's a reason Elon Musk, because you only have so many people. Okay.